My name is Sarah, and I'm 34 years old. My CEO husband fired me for his mistress, then smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're terminated. Take your old laptop and get out. This $8 million company is mine now, and Melissa will take your place. The divorce papers are already on the way." I smiled back because he didn't know my hidden code would activate in 10 minutes, and when it did, his entire empire would collapse into nothing but dust and regret. Before I tell you how it ended, hit that subscribe button and comment where you're watching from, because this story proves that silence can be more dangerous than any scream of revenge. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 7 years ago, David and I were nobody. We had nothing but dreams and a small apartment that smelled like instant coffee and broken promises. I remember sitting on our second-hand couch, watching him sketch out business plans on napkins while I coded prototypes on my ancient laptop until 3 in the morning. We built that company together. Every sleepless night, every rejected investor meeting, every moment when we wanted to quit but didn't, because we had each other. I wasn't just his wife. I was his partner, his foundation, the person who turned his wild ideas into functioning reality. But money changes people. Success is poison when it flows through weak veins. The moment our company hit its first million, David started looking at me differently. Not like his equal anymore, but like a reminder of when he was small. And God, how I hate that I didn't see it coming. The signs were there, weren't they? The way he stopped asking for my input in meetings, how he'd introduce me as my wife instead of my business partner to investors, the subtle shift from "we built this" to "I created this" in every interview he gave. And then came Melissa, 26 years old, blonde hair that caught office lighting like spun gold, and a smile that made powerful men forget they had wives at home. She started as his assistant, but within months, she was attending board meetings while I was relegated to handling the technical stuff behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. Like I was some kind of janitor cleaning up messes instead of the architect who designed the entire foundation he was standing on. The humiliation was slow, methodical, like death by 1,000 paper cuts. David would make decisions without consulting me, then act surprised when I questioned him. "Sarah, you're being emotional," he'd say, and every woman reading this knows exactly the tone I'm talking about. That dismissive, patronizing voice that makes you feel crazy for having opinions about your own life's work. I watched him promote Melissa to Chief Operating Officer. My position. The role I'd been performing without the title for 6 years while he played CEO and took credit for systems I built with my own hands. But I stayed quiet. I stayed professional. I told myself that love meant supporting him even when it felt like drowning. What a fool I was. The day he fired me started like any other. I walked into the office building we'd bought together, past the lobby where our company's mission statement was etched in marble. Words I'd written. Values I'd insisted on. I took the elevator to the 10th floor, the executive level, where my keycard still worked, and my nameplate still sat outside an office I'd barely been allowed to use for months. David called a staff meeting at 9 a.m. The entire company gathered in the main conference room, 67 employees who'd grown to respect me over the years. I sat in the back, as had become my habit, watching my husband command the room I'd helped design. "Today marks a new chapter for our company," he announced, his voice carrying that artificial confidence I'd grown to despise. "We're restructuring our leadership team to better reflect our growth and vision." He looked directly at me when he said it, and I knew. In that moment, I knew what was coming, and the betrayal hit me like ice water in my veins. Sarah Martinez will be stepping down from her position, effective immediately. 67 pairs of eyes turned to look at me, some shocked, some pitying, some carefully neutral because they knew which way the wind was blowing. I felt my chest constrict, felt my breath catch. But I kept my face blank because I'd learned that showing weakness in front of David only made him crueler. Melissa Chen will be taking over Sarah's responsibilities as our new Chief Technology Officer. The woman who couldn't code her way out of a paper bag was taking over the technology department I'd built from nothing. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. After the meeting, David approached me with that smug expression I'd once found charming. "Congratulations, you're terminated. Pack your things and get out. This $8 million company is mine now, and Melissa will take your place in every way that matters." He paused, savoring the moment like fine wine. "Oh, and Sarah, the divorce papers will be delivered to your apartment this afternoon. I hope you kept copies of your personal files because you won't be coming back here." He gestured to the security guard standing nearby. "Make sure she only takes personal items. The laptop stays." The laptop. My laptop. The one I'd used to build every system, every protocol, every line of code that kept his precious empire running. He thought he was being clever, keeping my tools away from me. If only he'd known what those tools really contained. I walked to my office under escort like a criminal, 6 years of my life packed into a single cardboard box. Personal photos, a coffee mug my sister gave me, a small plant that had somehow survived the fluorescent lighting. The security guard watched me like I might steal the stapler. But I wasn't angry yet. That's the strange thing about betrayal this deep. At first, you're just numb. Shock acts like anesthesia, protecting you from the full impact until your mind can process what's happening. As I walked past my former colleagues, some whispered apologies. Others avoided eye contact completely. Jennifer from accounting mouthed, "I'm sorry," when the security guard wasn't looking. Marcus from sales looked genuinely upset. These people had worked with me, respected me, and now they were watching me be erased like I'd never mattered at all. David handed me my personal laptop, the old one I'd kept for non-work projects. "There you go. Everything you need to start fresh somewhere else." He had no idea that laptop contained backup access to every system I'd ever built for the company. No idea that my personal projects included automated monitoring protocols that tracked every transaction, every security breach, every piece of data that flowed through our networks. You see, when you're married to someone, you trust them completely. And when you're the person building security systems for a growing company, you make sure you can always access those systems if something goes wrong. I'd installed a dormant protocol in every piece of software I'd written, a safeguard that would activate if I ever lost access to the company systems unexpectedly. It was my insurance policy against exactly this scenario, though I'd never imagined I'd need it against my own husband. The beautiful irony was that David had insisted I handle all the technical boring stuff, while he focused on strategy and vision. He'd never bothered to understand how the company actually operated. He just knew it worked, and he'd assumed it would keep working without me. Men like David never realize that the people they dismiss are often the ones holding everything together. As I walked out of the building, carrying my pathetic cardboard box, I checked my watch. The protocol would activate in exactly 8 minutes and 37 seconds. 8 minutes until David learned the difference between being in charge and being essential. I sat in my car in the parking lot and watched through the windows as normal business continued inside. Melissa was probably already moving into my office, hanging her decorations where mine used to be, sitting in my chair like she belonged there. 5 minutes. I thought about calling David, warning him, giving him a chance to fix what was about to happen. For exactly 3 seconds, I considered being the bigger person, taking the high road, letting love win over justice. Then I remembered the look on his face when he'd fired me, the satisfaction, the cruelty, the way he'd enjoyed every second of my humiliation. 3 minutes. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Security says you left quietly. Smart choice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." 1 minute. I started my car and drove away, but I kept watching the office building in my rearview mirror until it disappeared from sight. 30 seconds. The protocol activated at exactly 10:47 a.m. I was 2 miles away when my phone started ringing, Unknown numbers, blocked calls, then David's contact photo filling my screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By noon, I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails I hadn't listened to. The first sign something was wrong came when clients couldn't access their accounts. Simple login issues that should have taken minutes to resolve stretched into hours because the automated systems I'd built started requiring manual verification for every transaction. Then the backup servers began cycling offline randomly, forcing emergency IT protocols that required authorization codes only I possessed. Customer service calls flooded in as the company website started displaying error messages that made no sense to anyone except the person who'd programmed them. By 2 p.m., Melissa was discovering that being Chief Technology Officer meant more than just having the title. When panicked employees asked her how to override system failures, she couldn't even understand the questions they were asking. David's first voicemail was confused, but still arrogant. "Sarah, there's some kind of technical issue here. Call me back so we can sort this out professionally." His second voicemail, an hour later, was more urgent. "The systems are acting up worse now. I need you to walk Melissa through the emergency protocols." By his fifth voicemail, I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "Sarah, please. Whatever's happening, we can figure this out. The board is asking questions I can't answer." If you've ever felt the satisfaction of someone finally understanding your worth after they've thrown you away, hit that like button and comment your location, because what happened next was better than any revenge I could have planned. The beautiful thing about automated systems is that they follow logic, not emotion. They don't care about hurt feelings or betrayed trust. They simply execute the parameters they were programmed to follow. And I'd programmed them very, very carefully. Every security protocol I'd installed over 6 years included failsafes that required my personal authorization to override. Not David's, not the board's, not some generic admin account that could be reset by calling tech support. Mine, specifically. As Chief Technology Officer in everything but title, I'd been the one who designed our disaster recovery procedures, our data protection protocols, our client security measures. I'd insisted on making them foolproof, tamper-resistant, and absolutely bulletproof against external threats. I'd just never mentioned that I was also protected against internal threats, including threats from my own husband. By Wednesday, 3 days after my termination, the company was hemorrhaging money. Client contracts were frozen because verification systems couldn't confirm transaction authenticity. The accounting software was locked in emergency audit mode, requiring forensic-level documentation for every expense over $50. Most devastatingly, the customer database was gradually becoming inaccessible as encryption protocols cycled through increasingly complex security requirements. Melissa couldn't access client contact information, financial records, or project histories. She was Chief Technology Officer of a company whose technology no longer recognized her authority. David's voicemails became increasingly desperate. "Sarah, this is insane. You can't hold the entire company hostage because you're upset about the divorce. The board is talking about emergency measures. You're destroying everything we built together. Melissa says she needs your access codes. This is bigger than our personal problems now." Our personal problems. As if 6 years of partnership and marriage were just a minor disagreement we could sort out over coffee. Thursday morning brought the emergency board meeting I'd been expecting. 12 investors who'd trusted David's leadership suddenly realized their $8 million investment was controlled by systems they didn't understand, designed by a woman they'd allowed to be fired without question. I know about the meeting because Jennifer from accounting called me. Sweet Jennifer, who'd always appreciated how I'd helped her streamline her processes, who'd seen me work nights and weekends to keep everything running smoothly. "Sarah," she whispered into the phone, clearly hiding from someone. "It's chaos here. David's trying to blame you for some kind of sabotage, but the board is asking why critical systems were dependent on one person. They're asking why no one else has administrative access to the technology that runs the entire company." She paused, then added with obvious satisfaction, And they're asking why the chief technology officer they just hired doesn't seem to understand the technology she's supposed to be in charge of. The questions David couldn't answer were the ones I'd been asking for months. Why had he never bothered to learn how his own company operated? Why had he been so eager to eliminate the person who understood every piece of infrastructure that kept his empire functional? Why had he assumed that getting rid of me would be consequence-free? Friday brought the first client cancellation. Morrison Industries, our biggest account, worth $1.2 million annually. They needed access to project files for a board presentation, but the document management system I'd built was requiring authentication protocols that Melissa couldn't provide. When Morrison's CEO couldn't get answers about when normal access would be restored, they activated the termination clause in their contract. 8 hours later, 3 smaller clients followed suit. David's weekend voicemails were no longer demanding. They were begging. "Sarah, please. You're right to be angry, but don't destroy innocent people's jobs because of what I did to you. The employees here didn't hurt you. Jennifer, Marcus, all the people who worked with you, they don't deserve this." He was right, of course. Those people were innocent. But they were also learning something important about the man they worked for. That he'd built his empire on someone else's foundation and then kicked that foundation away without understanding what would happen next. Monday morning brought the call I'd been waiting for. Not from David this time, but from Charles Morrison himself. "Ms. Martinez," his voice was calm but curious, "I understand there have been some changes at your company. I also understand that you're no longer with them." "That's correct, Mr. Morrison." "Well, that's unfortunate for them. You've been the person I've dealt with on technical matters for 3 years now. Professional, competent, always available when we needed solutions." He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'd like to discuss the possibility of Morrison Industries working with you directly. We have some projects that require exactly your expertise, and frankly, we'd rather work with someone we trust than deal with whatever's happening over there." 3 more clients called that week with similar offers. They didn't want to work with David's company anymore. They wanted to work with me. By the end of the second week, the company had lost 40% of its client base and was hemorrhaging operational costs, trying to restore systems that couldn't be restored without my cooperation. David's final voicemail was different from the others. Quiet, defeated. "Sarah, I know I don't deserve your help. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, help me understand what you need to make this stop. I'll sign whatever papers you want, give you whatever settlement you ask for. Just please don't let everything we built together disappear." Everything we built together. Finally, after 2 weeks of crisis, he remembered that we had been part of the equation, but it was too late for we. I met with my lawyer that afternoon. Victoria Chen, no relation to Melissa, though the irony wasn't lost on me, had been preparing for a difficult divorce battle against a wealthy husband with powerful connections. Instead, she walked into negotiations with evidence that David's $8 million empire was entirely dependent on technology controlled by the woman he was trying to divorce. "Your husband seems to have made a strategic error," Victoria said, with the kind of smile lawyers get when they know they're holding all the cards. "His company's value is based on systems he doesn't control, managed by processes he doesn't understand, built by a person he no longer employs." The divorce settlement was generous. I kept the house we'd bought together, the cars, the investment accounts I'd managed while he played CEO, and most importantly, I kept all intellectual property rights to the systems I'd developed during our marriage. David could keep his title and his company name, but if he wanted his systems to function normally again, he'd need to license my technology back from me at rates I considered fair. Which turned out to be exactly what his operational costs had been before the crisis, plus a 30% premium for the inconvenience of having been fired. Melissa lasted 6 more weeks as Chief Technology Officer before David quietly reassigned her to special projects, which everyone understood meant she was being paid to stay away from anything important while they searched for her replacement. The replacement they hired was a competent programmer named Robert Kim, who spent his first month documenting all the ways the company's systems had been brilliantly designed by someone who understood both technology and business operations at a level that impressed him. When Robert requested a meeting with me to discuss consulting opportunities for system optimization, I agreed. Not because I wanted to help David, but because I respected professionalism, and Robert seemed like someone who understood the difference between technical skill and corporate politics. "Ms. Martinez," Robert said during our coffee meeting, "I've spent my entire career working with business systems, and what you built here is genuinely impressive. The integration between customer management, financial tracking, and security protocols is seamless, elegant even." He paused, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I also understand why Mr. Martinez is having difficulty operating without your involvement. These aren't just computer programs. They're business intelligence systems that require deep understanding of how the company actually functions, not just how it's supposed to function on paper." I appreciated his honesty. "And what would you like from me, Robert?" "Partnership," he said simply. "I can maintain these systems, but I can't innovate them the way you did. And frankly, after seeing how this company treated its most valuable asset, I'm not confident about my long-term prospects here." 6 months later, Kim Martinez Technical Solutions opened our doors with Morrison Industries as our first major client. Robert brought the technical skills to scale our operations. I brought the business relationships and system innovations that had made David's company successful in the first place. We now employ 15 people, including Jennifer, who left David's company when they couldn't match the salary and respect we offered her as our chief financial officer. David's company still exists, though it's smaller now. Without the competitive advantages my systems had provided, they've lost ground to more innovative competitors. Last I heard, they'd been acquired by a larger firm that was primarily interested in their client list and office lease. Melissa? I honestly have no idea what happened to Melissa. Once David no longer needed a replacement wife, she became irrelevant to the story. But I think about David sometimes, wondering if he understands what really happened. It wasn't revenge, despite what he probably tells people. Revenge would have been destroying his company out of anger or spite. What happened was consequence. When you build your empire on someone else's foundation, you don't get to kick away that foundation and expect everything to remain standing. When you treat partnership as disposable, you discover that loyalty was the only thing keeping your world stable. David didn't lose his company because I sabotaged it. He lost it because he never understood that it was never really his to begin with. It was ours, built together, sustained together, protected together. The moment he decided it could be his alone, it stopped being sustainable. I didn't destroy him. I simply stopped protecting what I'd built. And sometimes, that's all it takes to learn the difference between power and competence, between being in charge and being essential, between having a title and actually deserving it. The beautiful irony is that David got exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be the sole owner of his empire, free from the woman who'd shared his vision and built his dreams into reality. He got his wish. He became the sole owner of a company that couldn't function without the person he'd thrown away. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or erased by someone who needed you more than they realized, comment, "I stayed silent," below. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about quiet people holding dangerous power, and share this with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own choices. Because in the end, the people who dismiss you often discover that they dismiss the only thing keeping them from falling.